Good morning.
Good morning.
As Jacques said, it's my first time preaching here, first time preaching anywhere actually, so you'll have to bear with me. I did find a good quote though to kind of guide my sermon crafting. It said, "There's a fine line between a long, drawn-out sermon and a hostage situation." I'm hoping to avoid both of those situations today. So, but say, is there football, Sean? Is there football after church today? Yeah? Okay, so I see Sean going on his phone. I know I've gone too long. Football started. I'll just keep you on the phone the whole time. Okay. So, as Pastor Jacques mentioned, we're starting a series, The Greatest Story Ever Told. Now I didn't mention this to Jacques, but I gotta be honest, that title is probably as cliche as it gets. I mean, when you hear The Greatest Story Ever Told, it's like, okay, you know what that's about, right? And it's about Jesus. And okay, here we go again. It's Christmas time, so of course we talk about Jesus. But I'm really actually excited to be able to introduce the series, and I swear Jacques chose this title for the purpose of setting the stage. So if we choose a really, really cliche title, and then the sermons that are to follow will really be full of meat and contrast the cliche title. I'm gonna have to get this mic secured in here. Rubber band. Duct tape and wax my beard when it comes off. We'll see if that works better. So today's title was Break Boxes and Relationships. So a little off the cuff and different. You might be like, how does that connect to The Greatest Story Ever Told? Well, we'll get into that. But before we start though, in keeping with today's culture and times, when you start any conversation or message, it seems important to talk about who we're not going to offend and what we're not going to do and how safe we're going to be. So in keeping with that, I want you to understand that this message is not meant to provide an exhaustive summary of the 2,000 years of Christianity, nor am I going to be able to accurately explain Christianity in the 25 minutes we have together. 20, however long let me go. 15? Okay. Once I hear Sam's belly start rumbling. Today's focus I have two goals. One, I want to examine possibly some unhealthy boxes in our life that we may try to fit into. And then two, I want you to invite you to step out of those boxes and into freedom. And that freedom is going to come through the power of relationship, specifically relationship with Jesus. So that's my focus today. And that's why I gave the preamble. I'm not going to be able to give a complete picture of Christianity. We're going to explore these two concepts. So you might be asking, what are brain boxes? Well, I'll tell you, it's a term I came up with. There's no magical definition for it. But before we start, I want to actually start with a prayer and a passage in Isaiah 55, verses 10 to 11. I'm going to read this as a prayer. As the rain and the snow comes down from heaven, and do not return to it without watering the earth, and making it bud and flourish, so that it yields seed for the sower and bread for the water, so is my word that goes out from my mouth. It will not return to me empty, but will accomplish what I desire and achieve the purpose for which I sent it. Heavenly Father, I pray this morning that as we share this time together, as I share these ideas you've laid in my heart, I pray that your word will go out and achieve the purpose for which you sent it. Amen. So brain boxes. Brain boxes is the term that I use to describe how we function in life. We have all types of boxes. The biggest one that we put everything through is our worldview, our religion, right? How we understand everything. That's the big brain box. And inside of that brain box, we have all these other smaller boxes. I'll give you a few examples. We have a driving box. When you go to get into your car, you put on the driving box. And inside that driving box, there's a set of instructions. Maybe on this side of the box is all the rules of the road about how you have to stop at stoplights and red lights. Orange lights, I think, can speed up, but stop signs, stop, yield signs, those are confusing. Maybe on the other side of the box, you have some sticky notes, maybe about driver etiquette. When there's a merge lane up ahead, don't do the zipper thing, because that's very misunderstood in Alberta. Merge over and leave the lane empty for a long time, right? Because otherwise drivers get really angry at you. Maybe there's another note about watch out for the wildlife, right? Maybe on the top of the roof there's a note, listen to the backseat driver, or don't, whichever you prefer. But these boxes serve a very useful function, right? And we create them all throughout life. And they're created from a few different places, right? We create them through connections with other people. For instance, right now, Sam and I'm building a hunting box. And Sam's helping me build that box. And inside that box, I got instructions about how to track down an animal, how to skin it and butcher it, how to shoot it, how to find it. And on this whole side of the box, I have this long list of rules, because there's a lot of hunting regulations I'm learning about. You've got to follow them, or else the fish cops come and take your hunting box away from you. You don't get a hunt anymore. But these boxes are built on a relationship, right? So Sam is actually this afternoon going to go out with me, right? So we're going to talk to landowners and find out if we can hunt on their land. And that's something we do through relationship. I'm spending time with Sam, and he's mentoring me in that process, right? And there's another example of a box would be, we talked about the driving one, we talked about the hunting one. Or the other idea with the boxes is, in how we create them, is the function the brain plays in learned experiences. So sometimes we learn those, build those boxes through relationship, right? Mentoring each other and learning. The other way is life teaches us lessons. And going back to the driving one, I remember I had this idea that driving at night was really easy. I mean, there's a white line, and your headlights kind of light up the white line, and you just go down the roadway. It's not a big deal, right? Until that white line turned into like a white moose, and that was in front of me, and then my brain took notes. I mean, there was a crash, and I still to this day remember that terrible, terrible feeling. I'm not making light of it, but that sick feeling after the crash, right? And the brain doesn't forget that, right? So after that, when I'm driving now, the brain is like looking for deer everywhere, looking for moose everywhere. I mean, there wasn't a deer the deer could be 100 feet still inside the bush line. My brain saw it. It knew it was there. That deer thought they were sneaking up at me. Not when I was driving after that, right? So life experience is another way we build those boxes, right? And I'll go on a little side trail here. Actually, it's interesting how the brain works. So in your brain, you have part of it called the amygdala. And it's a very small part, and it regulates fear, anxiety, has to do with memory. And for those who are more fully trained in psychology, I'm not even trained in it, I should say. I apologize if I don't quite explain this perfectly, but that's actually where PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder, comes from. Because as we're building these boxes of life, sometimes things go wonky, right? So in the car crash with the moose, maybe, or if you think about a soldier that fights in a battle, they're going to a very specific box of life or death, right? And that's a very scary, difficult box to be in. And when you're in that box, sometimes that part of the brain makes a rule, and it applies that rule to all the boxes, which doesn't work very well. It may work very well in a life or death situation, because you need to survive that. But if we take that rule then, and now you're home with your wife and children, and your brain is still thinking it's a life or death situation, and it's applying these rules, that's not going to work very well. It worked well and kept you alive in a life or death situation, but it doesn't work very well when you're trying to relate to your kids, or your wife, or your husband, right? So that's actually, I know I'm on a real side trail here, but that's kind of where PTSD comes from, right? When this rule gets applied to all the boxes of life and it doesn't make sense, it shouldn't be that way. And that's when things get wonky, right? Because sometimes these boxes of life, we build them up and they don't operate the way they should, right? And that kind of transitions to the second part, where I want to talk about unhealthy boxes. And try to think about that for a second. I'm going to see if I can get this adjusted better, so it doesn't keep falling. I think my head shape is a little different than John's. You have more substance in the playing department. I think I have it set now. So sometimes these boxes that we use to function become like prison cells. Sometimes we create rules in them that create problems and don't allow us to function well. And that's really what I want to get into today, and specifically with regards to Christianity and legalism. And like I said, remember my preface I said at the beginning, I'm not giving a perfect summary of Christianity, and by no means do I want to discredit the hundreds of years of theology that people have studied theology. That's not my goal here. My goal is for each one of us to consider the big box of Christianity that we have, and whether we have unhealthy rules in there, and how should that look. So when we think about Christianity, it's kind of important that we think about some rules. Because, Christianity sets up a pretty serious stage of life. It says there's a heaven, it says there's a hell. And hell is a really, really bad place that you don't ever want to go. Oh, and by the way, if you do go there, you don't get out. You can't take the second exit and be like, sorry, God, mistake, no, I'm good, I don't want to go there. No, Christianity says once you're in there, it's there forever. So it makes sense that humans, if we have our brains, we build boxes to understand how to work with life, it makes sense that we're going to try to figure out these rules. To be like, I don't want to go to that bad place, right? I don't want to get stuck there forever. And it makes sense that we maybe go to the Bible to do that, right? That's fair. That's where the source of information comes from. So, well, let's go there. If we look at Galatians 5, verse 19 to 21, we'll maybe look and see what it says about building this box of Christianity. Now, the works of the flesh are evident: sexual immorality, impurity, sensuality, idolatry, sorcery, enmity, strife, jealousy, fits of anger, rivalries. Are you guys writing this down in your box of Christianity? It's important. Divisions, envy, drunkenness, orgies, and things like these. I warn you, as I warned you before, that those who do such things will not inherit the kingdom of God. Let's look at James 1, verse 15. Then desire, when it has conceived, gives birth to death. And sin, when it is fully grown, brings forth death. Matthew 5:48. You therefore must be perfect, as your heavenly Father is perfect. So if we just consider those verses, you can see how we can start to construct a box of Christianity that is very difficult. Because I don't know about you, but that long list of items there, fits of anger, jealousy, strife, I sure haven't met the bar that's set for that. Now, if we just leave it there, we end up with a box of Christianity that is really difficult. And I remember as a child, actually, struggling with this. I grew up in a house that, in our early years, was very focused on rules and legalism inside of Christianity. And that changed in later years. But as a younger child, there was lots of boxes I had to stay within. And I was very genuine as a child. I understood the concept of heaven and hell. I genuinely wanted to be in the good box, right? But it became very difficult. I remember one example. If I wanted to be in a good box as a child, I was told that I could never masturbate, right? And this might be an awkward topic for some people, but I think it's important we talk about these things. And I'm not saying, as parents, I'm not saying one way or another, what is right or wrong. I'm just saying that was the box that I grew up in. And that was a sin before God if I did that. Now you think about it as a young man going through puberty, what kind of stress that creates. Because if I want to be good, I have to behave in this box and go to if I want to go to heaven. And you can see where you run into problems. And as a child, what did I do? Well, I was supposed to confess to my parents if I sinned, right? If I did that, I was supposed to confess to my parents. And that created a lot of anxiety. So then I would lie. But if I'm lying, that's in the bad box as well. So what do I do, right? And I can remember as a child the anxiety that created because I sincerely was trying to avoid being put in that hell box. And then I lied, and then that put me there. And if I didn't lie, I was honest, then I couldn't live with what I was doing because it also put me in the hell box. And in some ways, I was creating this box of Christianity that was a trap and a prison cell and not a place I wanted to be. I can honestly remember being unable to sleep at night because of the anxiety in my head over it. So it was very real to me. And maybe some of you connect with that now, struggling with that set of rules that you feel you must live up to. And even if that isn't your upbringing, maybe you came from more of a relaxed or not as rule-focused upbringing, I think it's still important to think about how we judge each other as Christians inside the church. And give yourself some grace. It's natural to judge. If we go back to those boxes, let's look at the driving box. It's essential that we judge. I mean, I'm coming up to a crosswalk and someone's about to cross. I have to make a judgment about whether I need to slow down, right? And stop and wait for them. Or you're the person at the crosswalk. You're making a judgment about whether that car is going to stop for you. Everywhere we go in life, we're making judgments, and it actually keeps us alive. If you said, I'm not going to judge, well, that's a myth. I mean, the very fact that you're choosing where to look with your eyes is a judgment, even if it's happened subconsciously, right? If you're looking at me, if you're looking at your phone, or wherever, right? You're making a judgment about where to put your eyes. So the concept that we can be judgment-free is not true. But what we should pay attention to is how we're judging, right? And that's what I'm asking you to look at with maybe your box of Christianity, or maybe how you're looking at other people's boxes of Christianity, how you're judging their boxes, right? Whether that's healthy. And you may be thinking, well, what does an unhealthy box look like? How do I know if a box is becoming unhealthy, right? Well, this works for me, it's good. Well, there's a few different ways you can look at that, but the one I want to kind of focus on has to do with relationship. And that's what the last part of what I'm going to talk about today is about relationship, right? And as we get to the greatest story ever told, we're going to look at what Jesus said about relationship. But before we do that, I do want to spend a little time talking about unhealthy boxes and how they exhibit themselves. And I mentioned as a child that anxiety I had, and anxiety is really interesting. I know we spent the last 4 weeks talking about anxiety, but it's so interesting I'm going to take 2 minutes and talk about it again. What anxiety does is it makes you think about the future. And once again, that's important. Just like that judgment I talked about. If we never thought about the future, well, we'd be dead. Like, simply, if you didn't think forward to what's going to happen, you couldn't survive. We have to. Just at that crosswalk, you think ahead, and you see that car traveling, and you think to the future, right? Anxiety is when that gets out of hand. And when you're constantly thinking about the future and thinking about it with a fear of what it may bring, it can become anxiety, right? And what that does to relationship, well, you simply can't have relationship if you're in the future. Because relationship happens in the moment. If when Sam and I go out this afternoon to talk to farmers and different landowners about hunting on their land, if I'm so preoccupied about some other future event that I'm worried about, I can't have that relationship with Sam, these people we're meeting, in the moment. So that is one way you can look at your box and see if it's healthy or not. Am I having too much anxiety? Am I focused too much on the future? Now, don't take that the wrong way. I don't mean that to say that I'm going to throw the baby out with the bathwater and get rid of all my rules. No, that's not the way to take it. But it means that maybe we need to look at the box and see what's going on there. So, with that thought in mind, and the thought of the Christian legalism that sometimes we build unhealthy Christian boxes, I do want to move into the greatest story ever told. And as cliche as that title is, and we all know the story of Jesus, born of a virgin, married, spent some time on earth, and then died on a cross. What I want to examine is the time he spent on earth and what he said to us. And I think we can go to the Bible for that. I know we can. And I want to look at Matthew 22, verse 36 to 40. I'm just going to open it up here. This passage will be, I think, very familiar to a lot of us. So Jesus is talking to the Sadducees and Pharisees, and the Sadducees are trying to trick him, and it's not going well for them. And the Pharisees come in and say, "Teacher, which is the greatest commandment in the law?" And Jesus replied, "Love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your mind. This is the first and greatest commandment. And the second is like it. Love your neighbor as yourself. All the laws and the prophets hang on these two commandments." And there's two key words, and in the same word, that is repeated in both those commandments. Love the Lord your God, love your neighbor. Love must involve relationship. You can't love without relationship. The two can't exist. We've maybe, as guys, tried it inside our marriage sometimes. Our spouse wants to spend quality time with us, and we're like, I want to watch the football game, I want to work on the snowmobile, I'll just buy her flowers. It doesn't work. To show and experience love, you have to have a relationship, and a relationship involves being present together. It goes back to what I was saying with anxiety. Anxiety takes us into the future and disrupts relationship because you can't be present. So as we seek to show this love through relationship, it actually makes sense. Because if you think about it, everything, if we don't look at the scripture but just look around us, right? You think that if the scripture is accurate, it should line up with what we see around us, right? And everywhere you look, across every culture, across every time, we see humans and we see relationship. And we see that as inseparable. Find me a culture that is healthy and thriving where humans are not in a relationship. It doesn't exist. So let's go a little farther back then. It's like, well, if we have a designer, a God that created us, it makes sense that if we find relationship everywhere, that maybe he created that. And here's the interesting thing about a creator, right? A creator can't make something that's not in him. So maybe if relationship is everywhere we look, maybe this creator, maybe relationship's part of God's design, who God is, who his character is. So maybe that would make sense that when we come to the scriptures, the greatest commandment is about relationship too. You see how it all lines up, right? It all connects. What we observe with our eyes, through culture, through time, lines up with what Jesus said as well. I think that's very important to understand. But it's also important to understand beyond just the words of this commandment. Did Jesus live this out? What were Jesus' actions in this life? Because actions often we think speak louder than words, and they do, right? Here's an example. If I say, I have your back, well, that's nice. But do you really know that till I actually act it out? There's a video clip I'm gonna play, and in that video clip, you'll see the difference between saying something and then when push comes to shove, actually doing it. So if we can bring that video clip up, it's short, it's just 20 seconds. It's out there in cyberspace somewhere, it's coming. Here we go. Maybe play it again just in case you missed seeing that alligator. Look what's following this guy in as he's going to swim to shore. What do you think? Does that guy have his back? Are you willing to jump on an alligator with a karate chop for your buddy? Actions show where it's at. It's hard to lie about that. Okay, see, I have your back. But now he knows that he has your back, right? So on that context, let's look at some of the actions that Jesus did here, right? Luke 10, verse 1 to 2. And I'll just look it up in my Bible here. After this, the Lord appointed 72 others and sent them out 2 by 2 ahead of him to every place in town where he was about to go. He sent them out 2 by 2. Now, if we're doing simple math, if I want to have the most impact possible, maybe I'd send them out 1 by 1. Now I double my coverage, right? But Jesus sent them out 2 by 2. And I think there's many significant reasons we could go into why, but I think it's reasonable to conclude that relationship is one of those. If relationship wasn't important, it'd send them out 1 by 1, right? But no, we sent them out 2 by 2. I'm not going to look up these passages. You can if you want. Mark 2, verse 15 to 17. Luke 7, 36. Jesus shares meals with people. And those are two examples, but I think as soon as you think of the Gospels, you think of almost every story, not every story, but a lot of Jesus' stories actually revolve around shared meals. And I think that once again shows that relationship is important. I mean, anyone can eat. You go through the McDonald's drive-thru and eat by yourself in the vehicle. I'm sure there's different options not like that back in Jesus' time, right? But the stories we have show him sharing food with people in relationship. Matthew 18:20. I'll quickly look at this one. Again, I tell you that if two of you on earth agree about anything you ask for, it will be done for you by my Father in heaven. And then verse 20. For where two or three come together in my name, there I am with them. Now, we often think of this as gathering together for prayer, but have you ever thought about, well, why two or three? Why can't it just be me? Does it maybe have something to do with relationship and being together in a common theme and a common prayer to God? I'm going to guess that if relationship wasn't important, that you would just say, well, when you get together with me, it's, we can get it figured out. So, and the last one is Ephesians 5. At the end of this chapter, you can look at it if you want. It's a chapter on marriage, right? Wives, husbands, do all this stuff. And then there's the comparison of Jesus and the church being compared to marriage. And I think it's fair to say on earth that marriage is probably one of the most significant relationships we experience, right? When it goes bad, it's difficult, it's painful. And when it goes right, it's beautiful and amazing. And in that relationship is so much emotion, so much of our life, right? And here Jesus has said that actually that's just a picture of my relationship with the church. Once again, relationship and how important it is. And in the midst of the suffering and pain on earth, I really do believe that relationship is it, the most important thing. How much more beautiful and meaningful will a relationship be when all the suffering is gone, when the imperfections of earth are over? Now, I want to share a story. I think of the relationship I had for 5 months with my son, Caleb. At the start, Caleb was just a sperm and an egg that joined together. I remember the joy that we felt at the thought that a baby was inside Elizabeth. It changed our entire view of life. Each moment of each day was so much brighter. Really, that relationship was one of expectation. I hadn't met our son, but I had an expectation of a son that we were going to have. And as the months went by and Elizabeth's belly grew, so did our relationship with our son. I spent time praying with Elizabeth for our boy, time helping Elizabeth through morning sickness, time resting my head on her belly and feeling Caleb move, time listening to the heartbeat at the doctor's office, and time seeing him on the ultrasound. 5 months of time, that was all we had with Caleb. And in the fateful day when there was no heartbeat. And on that day, an entirely different journey began for us. And in that new journey, I remember the moments and days and weeks that followed, having such a deep appreciation for the moments of relationship I had with my son Caleb in Elizabeth's womb. I can honestly say that the most joy I have had was in those months that we were pregnant. And it made me think that if a relationship with my son that I had not met can be so beautiful, how much more beautiful is a relationship with the God that created my son and allowed me 5 months of sharing the same physical world as him? Folks, this is what life is about. This is what we were created for. It is shown in you and me, as I said, even bigger than the Bible when we look around. There's a need within each one of us to have connection. And it's evidenced in the life of Christ as we explored and what he did on earth. And you may find yourself in a space where your box of Christianity is not a worldview that you view the world through. Maybe your understanding of Christianity is a little box that you've set on a shelf because you said, I don't like Christianity. I don't like what it says. And maybe inside that box is an understanding of Christianity based on the movies, based on culture. What I'm asking you to do today, if that's your situation, is to take that little box and transform it. Transform it into what we've explored today with the life of Jesus. You see, relationship doesn't need to be complicated. Sometimes, as humans, like I said, we need to make those boxes to function in life. So we've done that with Christianity. We said you say a prayer, you do this, you do that. And those are important. They play a role. But relationship is as simple as conversation, talking. That's where it starts. So if you find yourself in that situation where you've never had that relationship with Jesus, it's very simple to start. It's a conversation. And maybe you find yourself in a situation where, yeah, I'm a Christian, I have that relationship. Then I beg of you to look at it. Have you devoted the proper time to it? Think back to your marriage if you're in a relationship, or if you're not in a marriage, think back to someone you're close friends with. Relationship doesn't happen unless you do something. You have to spend time together, you talk, and you listen. Have you been doing that with Jesus? Have you been doing it enough? Those are the points that we need to ponder and consider. Just like Sam and me. I mean, we're building this hunting box, but it's way bigger than that. Over the years, our relationship has grown. Now Sam's a brother, a father, and a friend. Depends on the day. And someone I truly value and love. And that's how it is with Jesus. And I know I'm saying it kind of backwards, right? Because Jesus is the creator, right? And our relationships are the representation of that. But we live in a physical world, so sometimes we need to look at the physical to understand the spiritual. So think about it that way. Think about that relationship you have with someone that's close to you. And take that over to Jesus. So as we come to a close, we're not going to have to say any special prayer or anything, but I do want to take time to give everyone that space to talk to Jesus. Sometimes we need to talk together, but sometimes it's good to do it alone. So we're going to take the last few minutes of the service, and we're just going to have some space where we can talk to Jesus. Maybe it's been a while, maybe it's been never. Or maybe it's something you just love to do all the time. Either way, there's no reason why you don't want to do it right now. And you may be familiar with how sometimes we come forward to the front of the church, and there's space for that this morning. And the reason why is, it goes back to that video clip we saw. There's no magic in coming forward, but there's a connection in the brain when you act. So if you want to come forward and pray and talk to Jesus, that's fine. But if you want to sit there and talk, that's fine with me. So we'll just take the last few minutes, and when you've had that conversation and you're ready, just feel free to go out to the foyer where there's time to visit and connect. So we'll just keep the space quiet in here for that period of time.